Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised.
Finally, are you ready? Gosh.
You know
Three,
what?
two, one. Hello, Criminal Mischief Nation. Welcome back to another bonus episode of Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Branden. Excuse me. I'm Branden and joined, as always, by the great, lovely, and talented Carolyn Osorio. Carolyn, thank you for...
You're just already buttering me up because you know we're talking about you today.
Is that what this is about? I didn't see
Okay.
that. I missed an email.
This is tough. This is going to be painful for us both because Brandon can't take compliments and
Well, first of all,
it's hard.
First of all, how was your week? Is everything all right in your world?
You know what? I had such a wonderful weekend.
Oh, good.
Such a wonderful weekend. I just spent the afternoon with my son because my other son was having like a 15-year-old birthday party with a bunch of sleepovers with a bunch of kids. And thank God my husband is like, I mean, it takes a toll, but like I couldn't even do it. Okay. And
Yeah.
he can, and he takes him out to dinner. He takes him to the movie. He brings him back. They were all sleeping over. Anyway, I got to spend that time with our other son, who's 11, and he has this terrarium for his
With the fake dinosaur in it.
no,
Yeah.
this is the leopard gecko. And so
Oh,
we
okay.
went, so I was like, there's this little plant store that we go to that has like succulents, and it's just this really cool. You would probably think it's like totally bougie, but who cares? It's really cute and cool. And so we took his tank there, and he got this really cool, I don't know what his title is, but like he wears an apron that has like scissors in it and like, just like gear to cut plants and things. And he like set the whole thing up, and he just looked at me. He's like, Mom, I love it. I'm just so happy. And it was just so cute. It was so great.
Aw,
It was so cute. So
that's
anyway,
great.
it was great. It was just awesome. So I had a great weekend. How
Wow.
about you? How about you?
Uh, yeah, it was a long, tiring volleyball weekend with up at 5 a.m. driving, to hell and gone
To hell and gone.
for a 9 hour tournament and then home and it's 6 and you feel like it's 2 in the morning and it's still light outside because you've been up forever. It's like one of those weird disorienting kind of days. And then Sunday's just a wash because Saturday was just, so, but I love watching my kids compete and win or lose, they're good sports and they're good teammates. And
Isn't that
so
such a high? I mean, we've talked about this
yeah,
before, but
yeah, it's
like
great.
watching my son play soccer or any of my kids, but like right now it's soccer going on for him. And it was like the first game and they lost, but like the entire time I had this smile on my face because he was running as fast as he could, and he was like when he got a ball just knocked him in the head, he just didn't even do anything. Like, he like got skinned and, rug thing on his knee. And I was like, man, that fucking looked like that hurt,
Yeah,
because I'm sitting on the sidelines and he just gets up and it's just like, it's not like you want to teach your kids to not feel pain or to not like say anything or nothing like that. But just when they're so passionate about what it is that they're doing and they're just working so hard and they don't give up
yeah,
even when it's just it just is so like all those lessons, and it's not just me obviously as coaches and things like that, but like anyway, it's just it's very rewarding. So I'm sure you probably have the same feelings with your daughters.
I do. I do. Yeah. And
Yeah.
at first it's eye-opening how expensive travel, club team sports
Mhm.
are for
Mhm.
freaking early teens or tweens. I'm like, I'm spending what for this? What are you talking about? Like it was a little shocking, the price tag on it, but
Yeah.
worth it. They're making these great friendships and and it's LA, man. So it's weird. it's just weird. Like one of the girls on my youngest daughter's team is best friends with Jay-Z's daughter, with Blue Ivy, right? With
Hmm.
Beyonce's
Yeah.
daughter.
Yeah.
And so she has a birthday party, and ASAP Rocky plays a 13-year-old's birthday party at a club in Hollywood that they buy out. I'm like, what are you doing? No, what are you
My
talking about? That's
gosh,
not that's not real.
that would
It's
just
not re
suck. That would
and then
suck.
and then another girl's mom, her best friend is Kim Kardashian. So the team's outfitted with all like Skims stuff and sneakers and everything. And it's just that they just get, you know? And
How do you exist in that realm? That would
I
drive me nuts.
it's weird. It's weird, but it's exciting, but it's also just where we live. What am I going to say? No,
No, not
because
at
these little
all.
girls, because the girls don't know to her friend, her teammate. It's Blue, her friend Blue. That's it.
Yeah.
Like she couldn't give a shit who her mom is, you know. But for the parents' generation, we grow up on their music, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like it's weird.
I mean, that is weird. I mean,
Yeah.
I just, I don't get starstruck. So I do that kind of like, unless it's like,
No, I don't get starstruck. It's not being starstruck. It's being struck by how normal it all seems,
yeah,
given the global superstars that they are. Okay,
yeah.
my oldest daughter has a teammate whose mom is Wonder Woman, it's Gal Gadot.
Hmm.
Okay, the actress.
Hmm.
Okay, and so you're at a tournament, and then she's just another person standing in line to get a Slurpee. You know what I mean?
I
Like
know
that's
that kind of stuff would just like, it's just too much. Like
yeah,
I'm
it's
like
a little
the
weird.
combination of the two girls from Breakfast Club, like equal parts. So like to me, like depending on which one I'm inhabiting, like I
Yeah,
could be that girl that's going like that with my
right.
hair on the, you know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
with the pixie stick. Like I just could, that kind of stuff makes me anxious. Like I want to get away. I don't want to like schmooze. You know what I mean?
See,
So
I
that
wanted to be Bender, but I wasn't. I was the nerd.
really,
Yeah. I wanted to think I was Bender. I wasn't cool enough to be Bender. Yeah. I definitely wasn't the athlete. So the closest simulacrum to me in that movie was the nerd. Yeah.
that's too funny.
Yeah. It's true. I
Wow.
can admit it. It's fine. I admit it. It's true.
Okay, I'm not stopping you.
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm just, uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
Anyway.
All right. All
So,
right.
first of all, I want to thank you for the idea and for the offer to kind of surrender your feed to my show. I'm being honest. I know that that's valuable real estate in the podcast game, and
Mhm.
so I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well,
Mhm.
whenever it's funny because the shoe's on the other foot because usually you're listening to my stuff. You know what I mean? And we're reacting to my stuff or editing my stuff. And so it's really fun to like get into your world
Mm.
and it just totally reminds me of why I love your stuff. When I
Oh,
listened to the very first Ronald Reagan like
opening the
Olympic
games.
opening games, and I'm like,
Yes.
okay, okay, because you're just setting the scene
Mm.
so like completely like and I love that. You do such a good job of scene setting in this where you feel like you're there. And then you have like another thing that I noticed too is that you my husband calls it he's like don't get too tricksy because in my writing I love to like
Yeah.
have all these little like callbacks and like
Mhm.
this game in my head of like making everything make sense but you totally delivered on everything, you know what I
Mm.
mean, like the limbo and like the comparison with Dante and like so so it just is like kind of makes me feel like you love doing the true crime, but you also love doing things for yourself, like Dante, and hope that if you get it and enjoy it, other people will too. So I think that that's a good place a good place to live as a creative, you know?
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's yes, I do. I have to be oh my gosh, excuse me. I have to be interested in what I'm doing or just my heart's not going to be in it, right? So
Yeah.
I've got to make it at least a little bit more than just read because a lot of the topics that I choose, they're already adjudicated. They're already out there in there's nothing investigative about most of my work, right? I'm just retelling a story and it's got to be interest. I have to find an angle that keeps me that gets me up in the morning and gets me to my
I know.
day.
So tell me about what makes Dante get you out of bed in the morning. Because I had to, I don't know if you know this, but I was an English lit major. So I read
Oh,
a
cool.
lot of like, crazy tomes that nobody knows about, right?
Yeah.
But like Paradise Lost being one of those. So I kind of like
John
I never
Milton.
read Dante's Inferno,
Uh-huh.
but like I couldn't stand it. I was like, this is so boring. I can't. So what
Oh
is it
no.
about? I know
Wow.
I know I should, but like you actually made it really interesting,
Yeah. Well,
and so what is it about Dante's Inferno, especially as like a person who's, I mean, I don't think I'm letting the cat out of the bag. You're not a religious person. Like
no, no.
what makes Dante's Inferno relevant and interesting and like,
Couple things. One, the excitement or the readability will depend on the translation that you get. Okay, first of all. Okay, so do some research before you make sure you're reading one that's kind of accessible to you.
Dante
Second,
for Dummies?
yeah, no, or just get because if you're reading Homer, if you're reading Milton, if you're reading whatever, there's going to be different translations from different epochs of English literature.
Hmm.
Okay, where a history professor or a scholar in the 1850s will use almost completely different language than someone translating it in the 1950s. And they'll be reading the same thing and it'll mean the same thing to them. It's just the words that writers were using back then were different. Okay.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's accessibility of language when you just so make sure you're reading the right translation. And then with Dante with the Divine Comedy, all three sections of it, the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, is widely considered to be the greatest epic poem ever written.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's not a label that is given lightly by
I, yes.
historicity of the written word. So
Mhm.
that's something that when I'm 19 or 20 made me go, oh, that's a big statement to make.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me kind of find out, um, and it's one of those things where um, it's so infused. You get to know Dante so well reading it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And you get to know because I think we've talked about this before. I had a teacher in high school who said, it doesn't matter how much you read. It's not the breadth of what you read, it's the depth of what you read. Okay. And he gave
Mhm.
me this great advice. He said, pick a writer and read everything that they wrote. Like take a year and read all of Dickens, right? Or take a year and read all of Stephen King, read all of whoever, so you really understand what this person's trying to say. Like, okay, I get Dickens. Like, I totally have absorbed Dickens, and I get how he felt about the time he was living, and about class structure, and about poverty, and about the monarchy, and all that. I get it. Okay. Um, so with Dante, you understand him when you just by reading this like you understand how sad he was that some of his literary heroes were in limbo and they would never know like the divine love of God, okay? Because he was a believer, okay?
But
And
how does that, but you don't believe. So
it doesn't
how does
matter. You can still
that
understand the passion, right?
right,
Like
but how does that impact or inform your life? Like, what do you take away from that? Because I mean, I feel like that's what I would do when I was reading certain things is like, how is it relevant to my world today or to me personally? Like, what about, Dante's Divine Comedy
Mm.
resonated with you so that, it had to be more than just, yeah, a bunch of the people that he was into basically don't get to go to heaven because they weren't born yet to be able to be saved.
Right. So a couple of things. One, I'm just kind of in awe of the faith that people had back then. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't unique to Dante. That was just about everybody because there was really there was no choice. There wasn't, it was before a couple hundred years before the age of, 400 years before the age of enlightenment when people started rejecting a literal interpretation of the Bible, but also just with limbo, right? Just take that, for example. My takeaway from that is that how great it is to have heroes, how great it is to have people to look up to the point where you'll write about them in a way that lets people know, right? Like I know that there are out of the millions and millions and millions of people that lived before the time of Christ who happen to be in limbo, Dante picks these people and he wants to make limbo beautiful and he wants to make it peaceful. And their eternal torment is just a longing for the divine that they'll never get to. But otherwise, it's a great place to live. He wanted to make sure that his heroes were okay. So it's okay to have heroes. It's okay to try and create a world through your art that you wish existed. You know, like he has no proof of anything that he wrote. No one has any proof of the afterlife, right? He had no
Mhm.
proof of this, but still he created the world he wanted to create. And as you go forward in the story, when you get to like say violence, I think that's the violence, fraud, trying. Seventh circle or eighth circle is violence. And it's the phlegathon, it's the boiling river of blood where the murderers are and blah, 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 all this, right? And he name checks Alexander the Great because his conquests were all by slaughter. Okay. And I remember reading that when the first time I read this when I was 19 or 20, okay? And I didn't interpret because you're a fucking teenager. What do I, all right? Like I read it and I take away what I take away and then I move on. And then in the intervening years, I've read tons of shit about Alexander the Great, right? Like just about everything I could because he was such a brilliant strategist and he was one of the greatest leaders of men that ever lived and all this stuff. Um, and then to reread the Inferno and Dante name checked him boiling for eternity in the Phlegathon, I went, oh man, okay.
Mhm.
Different
Hey,
people have
well,
different
I'm
views.
gonna tell you, I went to episode 2 and the
Ah,
coiled tail. It's like
ah,
it's like, do I really need to be in that coiled tail? I mean, it's like
you
people,
do.
if you get to episode 1, please go to episode 2. Although it'll make you like never want to have an affair. Actually, she just kissed someone.
The lustful, yes, in the howling tempest
I
that
know, but
represent,
there's
yeah.
something like that imagery that you create with your words
Well,
is
that's
just
Dante.
really
Listen. It was difficult writing because I had to write it in two different kind of parts. There's the narrative part with about Ramirez telling the story, and then I tried to, get a little flowery or I borrow a lot of the kind of descriptive runs right from Dante and then kind of add some stuff to it. But
I know, but that's what I think that's the takeaway from episode 1. And of course, I said I listened to a little bit of episode 2,
no,
but like you're really making something that, one of the greatest literary works, you know,
yeah,
accessible to people in a podcast
good.
talking about the Night Stalker. I mean, I just
Yeah.
love it. It's like a mashup of like what you
Yes.
wouldn't expect. And so I was really appreciative of your creativity and just kind of like it took a little bit of it was just a great intro to the Night Stalker because it's such a horrendous crime spree. Like we
Oh
covered
yeah.
it 2 episodes for Criminal Mischief, and it was like one after the other, after the other, after the
Yeah.
other, after the other. And so it was just kind of like it gets lost in it. So, like, again, kind of referring to the greater text of like, what could be a takeaway from the Ramirez case? What is the takeaway from Dante? Because I think that's the whole point of, content and is how you can inform your own life with it. Obviously be, I don't want to say entertained, but you know what I mean? Like what can you take away from it? So I thought that you did that incredibly well. And the limbo thing was just amazing, not only with the limbo between June, what were the dates here? June 1984 and then the March of 1985 with the
Right.
two murders of the two young women, and just kind of like now we're descending into hell. I mean, it was
Correct.
just like, again, it was like a really nice, connecting the dots, and it made sense, and it didn't seem like you were tricksing out, like as what my husband
Well,
says.
oftentimes, listen, I often begin something with a very lofty goal and
Mm,
and and I fall short of it. And that's great. But because I know what I'm trying to do.
yeah,
And throughout this series, um, with varying degrees of success, do I hit the target that I was aiming for, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but when I started, when I knew I wanted to do a thing on Ramirez, and I was just always looking for an end, something that will make it
Mhm.
interesting for me. Uh,
Yeah.
and I talked to a couple of people that lived in LA during the time, and then my old boss. That's a true story. My old boss, and
Believe me, it's not a stretch to see you shooting the shit with your old boss and just be like, what?
and everyone said the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like we were going through hell. They
Mm,
used like that phrase, and then it just clicked, and I went, let me see if I can work this out. And so a lot of work went into all of the work for me anyway is always just in the outline. The
mm,
outline is my true north for it, right? That's where most of the work happens. And and then by like episode 4 or 5 of the outline, where there were so many where I didn't have to, I wasn't shoehorning Dante into the story. It
mm,
just, it really started dovetailing because all of these different levels of hell, which more or less coincides with the seven deadly sins plus limbo and plus hell, right? That's the 9 circles. Um, Richard Ramirez just embodied every
mm.
single one of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
From lust and because you listen to episode 2 and greed and gluttony and his drug abuse and violence and fraud and treachery and
Mm.
just it was all of it to the point where you realize just the level of depravity and sickness that Richard Ramirez was.
But then there's also like again scene setting with the LA Lakers and that one news clip with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird and the Celtics. I was like, wow, we're really going back.
Ooh,
Like,
Gen X, baby, look out.
I know. And
Yes.
then Bruce Springsteen, Born in the, I mean, you're just firing on all pistons with Michael Jordan. I mean, I just happened to be watching I watched the first episode of a new docu-series on the Celtics. So I was
Mhm.
kind of like, it was kind of in my head already. And so anyway, it was just great. Um, what was interesting, let me look at my notes here, sorry, is we talk about Jenny Vincow, right?
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved what you did with the survival instinct
Mm,
of the pattern recognition or pattern disruption. And then it again dovetailed into the predator prey
yeah.
motif,
Yeah.
throughout. So it was just really fun to have that because that part of my brain was satisfied with like why we do the things that we do. That's like something that I love to dive into. And so I think that totally makes sense. And your true crime training is really coming through. Um, when we get to the other crime scene where he banged on the garage door or the
The
car
car,
to get
yeah.
her attention to let he wanted to get her reaction,
He
you
needed
know?
her to see him. He needed her to know what was
Yes,
coming.
I know,
Yeah.
but don't you see, like, if you think about when you first started doing work in the true crime genre and not really understanding, at least for me, like I didn't really understand this kind of violence towards women, because I think that it's definitely that where you want to see the fear in their eyes. You want to, they want to, this certain type of predator wants that,
Yeah.
and this is a perfect example of that. And as well as when Dale
Yeah. Okazaki.
Okazaki was like peeping out, trying to see, and then he's
Ah,
waiting there
bang. One
to
shot.
get that reaction.
Yeah.
And it just really captured who
Hmm.
this guy is without knowing who, because you haven't really given us any details about him, but
Right.
like through these descriptors, it's like, oh my gosh, it's kind of more powerful than talking about all the blood and the gore and the guts and everything that he does, by
Yeah.
just giving us these little kind of vignettes into the psychology of this guy, with more to come, obviously, right?
Oh yeah. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to come. It's a dirty kind of weird place to dive into that psyche and to see, what what made him basically.
Hmm.
And so we wind up going back to El Paso in the 60s, and learn about, his mom and his dad and all of these terrible male influences in his life. One just dipshit after another that were just so horrible. And that's where he learned what a man was from these people. And so when it's kind of like, unfortunately, the dice were loaded for this guy from the start, given
Hmm.
his, and because it was decided that he was a made psychopath and not a born psychopath, which is a very specific distinction to make, that his life could have gone a completely different way. You
You
know,
believe that?
I do, after reading the psychiatry reports on this, and talking to people that I spoke to that you'll hear later on in the series. Yeah, I totally believe it.
So what was your process for the series? Like, what did you do?
I read a lot of Dante,
Okay.
um, and who's in my yard? Oh, hi. So I read a lot of Dante, and then uh, because I couldn't speak to either of the main detectives one on one because they are committed to a different show that's going to be happening soon, and I wish them all the best because they're true heroes to Los Angeles. And I mean, these guys are, Detective Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno. They are OGs when it comes to putting bad guys away. Okay.
Yeah.
And they were both very gracious in their passing on speaking to me, but pointed me in a lot of other good directions. So
Oh,
yeah,
good.
yeah, 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 yeah. So um my process was basically deep diving into each of uh the attacks, which they were a bunch. And there was one website run by a guy who I'm not going to name check him at all. He believes what he believes, but his entire life's work is trying to prove that Ramirez was innocent of all charges. Okay. And he did so much of the legwork in terms of procuring documents and interviews and getting stuff from public domain and Oprah requests and FOIA requests and all of that, that's just completely available out there. His determinations and his conclusions, I think, are cuckoo for fucking Cocoa Puffs, but good for him. He made all the information public, and so you're able
How
to
did
just
you
go,
find this guy?
I know a person. Don't worry about it. I know a guy. He's a good person. He's a good kid. He knows how to keep his mouth shut, so don't worry about it. But so so
Okay.
able to get things like interesting things, just like stuff that you wouldn't think is important until you realize the type of story I was trying to tell, like just addresses from where the events happened, right? Like what was the evidence collected? What was the evidence that was discarded? What were the statements that were made? What were the statements that didn't make it in, but they still had, like where Ramirez was staying. Okay. Like where was he living
So
during
these were
this?
all in the documents that this guy released.
A lot of them were, yeah. A lot of this was, and a lot of there was some other stuff that you could get from um, more just regular kind of sources like old news reports and stuff. You can sift through the archives because it was such a huge story in LA, right? You can go through the KCAL 9 news archives, NBC 4 news archives, right? Channel 11 news, all the local news archives. They have so much stuff on this, and a
Mm.
lot of it's in the public domain. And so that's where I got a lot of it there. And then reading, listening to a lot of his tapes because he gave a ton of interviews,
Mhm.
and so
What do you
that
think of the, we've talked about this so many times, the hybristophilia?
I'm covering that in a bonus episode. So I don't want to get into that just yet. But he got married. Yeah. He married a fan,
Hmm.
which, you know, will
Well, that's what
oh, I
hybristophilia
know. Yeah,
is,
yeah.
okay?
You go after criminals. You like the bad guys. You like the jailbirds. But listen, like I get it, right? Like if Richard Ramirez, if you didn't know him and you didn't know what he was doing, you look at a picture of him, he could be like a fashion model in the 80s, right?
Mm.
He could have
Well,
been
sans the
if
teeth.
he didn't smile, right? Or if he got all of his teeth capped, right? I mean, he was a sharp featured, thin, handsome, Latino mid-20s guy. You know,
Mhm.
they called it heroin chic in the 90s. Like that was him. He could have been a fucking Prada model in the 90s. So it's not surprising that women would find a man who looked like that attractive. So given the hybristophiliacs that are out there, like at least this one's good looking, right?
But it's not even like, I mean, that kind of flies out the window when you know what he did.
Of
Like
course,
it
or at
doesn't
least it
matter
should,
what he looks like, you know?
or at least it should. But I think the nature of hybristophiliac is you don't really care what their crimes are because you're attracted to the fact that they're criminals. So if they weren't criminals, you wouldn't care, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yes, but I'll get to that. I'm gonna cover that in a bonus episode because there's a lot of stuff that didn't fit into my narrative, like the trial. Didn't
Mhm.
cover the trial at all. Uh, the ensuing media circus that surrounded that trial. It was the OJ trial before OJ, right? 10 years
Yeah.
before OJ. Um, how it affected the city. What was Ramirez's like post-trial life like in jail? Like how did he die? Like all of that. So there's still a lot of meat left on the bone for a couple of months probably worth of bonus episodes, like 4 or maybe even 8 bonus episodes I'm going to do. So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, great job.
Thank you.
Really, really, really good job. Anything else you want to talk about episode one or tease for I mean, people can go and binge it
You can
now.
binge it right now. Yeah, you can binge it now wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And it gets I'm happy with how it turned out, right? I won't call it a home run. I there were some targets that I was shooting at in later episodes that I fell kind of short, but
What do you mean?
you'll see if you want to listen to it, you'll listen to it, but
I know, but
so
just I mean, like what how do you consider yourself creatively falling short? I'm just
just
curious.
listen, just what I like for example,
Yeah, yeah.
the eighth circle of hell is fraud. Okay. And we were getting to
Hmm.
the part in the story when Ramirez was in San Francisco. Okay.
Hmm.
And the LA Sheriff's homicide detectives uh, were contacted by San Francisco murder police saying, hey, we think the guy might be up here, right? Because We found a shoe print and the ballistics
The
kind of match.
Avias.
And the ballistics kind of match. Could you send us some info that you have on him? And they were like, yeah, we can, but we haven't released this at all. So, mum's the word. And they're like, yeah, word.
Oh, right. The
And
mayor.
and Mayor Feinstein
Yeah.
released it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult for me because she was a good and decent public servant for 30 plus years. Okay. But she fucked up by releasing all of that in a major, major way. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of tie the fraudulent aspect of human nature because because fraud has 10 concentric circles of varying types of fraud. And one of them has to do
Is
with,
that tail again?
no, and one of them has to do with politicians. Okay.
Mm. Mhm.
And so that I was trying to make a connection there, and it was thin, and so I didn't force it, and so the episode doesn't really have that punch that some of the other ones do. It's still a good episode, and I still really like it,
Yeah.
but it didn't land exactly how I wanted it to. But listen, hey, it happens. It happens.
No, I think it's great. If you can't, that's the thing about forcing something.
Yeah,
Forcing
you got to know when not to.
forcing the things to go through when it just doesn't. I'm almost done. Doesn't make sense.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. Exactly. So it's great. Listen, I hope all of our listeners go and find it and enjoy it. And if you want to keep doing this, I'm game. This was a lot of fun.
Well, good. We keep doing what? Like, it's.
I don't know. Like if you want to talk about episode 2 next week, that'd be great.
Aw. Well, you know what? I was very happy to support you in your endeavor.
Thank
It
you.
was great creatively. It was fun. And I mean, loosely fun, but I'm telling you, episode 2, people, be careful. Be
Awesome.
careful out there.
Well, hey, thank you very much for this. This was great.
Okay.
This was great. I appreciate the
All right.
opportunity. And,
Yes.
if you like the episode, please share it with anybody that you think might also like it. Go check out The Devil Within, Satan's Shadow, wherever you get your podcasts. And until next week, stay safe out there. Anything you want to add, Carolyn?
Nope. Bye.
All right, later.
From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.